The civil case seeks money damages against the offending drunk driver. That is where the survivor actually gets compensated.
If you're riding a motorcycle and you're hit by a driver who's intoxicated or distracted, what are your rights? We're going to find out right now when we ask the lawyer. Hi, everybody. I'm Judy Maggio with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest today is San Francisco lawyer Claude Wyle, who has spent many years representing motorcycle riders. Before we get started, we want to remind you, if you want to ask Claude any questions about your situation, just head to the AskTheLawyers.com site and click on the button at the upper right-hand corner that says Ask a Lawyer, and that's where you can ask your questions. Thanks so much for being with us today, Claude.
Thank you so much for having me, Judy. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. My first question, in your practice, have you found that motorcycle drivers usually are the ones at fault, or do most bikers you know and represent ride very carefully around cars?
In my practice, I find that about 90% of the time when there's a collision, it's not the motorcyclist's fault, but it's the fault of another motorist. This is, it's prevalent. You think all motorcyclists are crazy. The opposite is true. Most motorcyclists are actually paying more attention to the road and are riding less distracted than most motorists in cars or trucks or buses. You know, it's very difficult to be sending a text and looking at your phone when you've got two hands on the handlebars and your face is looking straight ahead. Motorcyclists tend to look straight ahead exactly at what they're supposed to be looking at, and they only look to either side a little bit. So that plays a huge part in who's at fault.
So let's say a biker was struck by a car and perhaps the driver may have been intoxicated, may have had a few drinks, either below or above the legal limit. Is there a way to prove that? And how does it affect the case?
Well, the only way to prove the other driver's intoxication is if the police who are reporting on the collision notice something and perform some tests, and then if that other driver goes through a blood test or a breathalyzer or something of the like, you're really never going to get somebody admitting to, well, yeah, I had too much to drink, but the police didn't check. So you depend on the police to do that, and a lot of times the person is prosecuted. But there's really not a good way through the civil justice system to start that process. We don't really have a right at the scene to intrude upon that person medically as the police do. So there's not much of a way to prove it ourselves, and we rely upon the public law enforcement to do it for us.
So say a driver is indeed criminally prosecuted for drunk driving. Does the prosecuting attorney represent the motorcycle, the injured biker in that criminal case, or can a biker obtain damages in a criminal case? How does all that work?
Thank you very much for asking a great question. The district attorney represents the people. You always see on TV and all that, the people versus, right? They don't represent the victim. They might sort of represent the victim, but they really don't do anything to get the victim compensated. That takes place in the civil justice system. And you don't need the district attorney to prosecute and try to throw somebody in jail or fine them in order to proceed with your civil court complaint and your civil trial. So it's the civil justice system that actually looks after, I don't like to use victim, but that's what the criminal justice system calls them. I call them survivors, okay? So if a motorcyclist is struck by a drunk driver, the district attorney will probably prosecute, and they can bring this all the way to trial. But you don't need the criminal case going to trial in order to proceed with your civil case. The civil case seeks money damages against the offending drunk driver. That is where the survivor actually gets compensated. There are two kinds of accountability. One, accountability going to jail, losing your license, being fined. Two, accountability, having to pay the damages that you've caused. If you are a drunk driver and you hurt someone, whether that's a motorcyclist, a bicyclist, a pedestrian, or another motorist, drunk drivers are accountable under the civil justice system as well.
Interesting distinction there, and an important one. So what if the biker suspects that the driver was distracted by a cell phone while driving? What can a lawyer do to see if that's actually true?
Well, there are ways to subpoena cell phone records. It's kind of roundabout and it's kind of difficult, but we do it often because sadly, these days, many drivers who are involved in collisions are they're distracted at the time. And there are records, and you've got to get the right cell tower, and it's rather technical, and it's difficult to punch through the rights of privacy, but we do it. And oftentimes you get somebody who actually admits to it. A lot of times they don't admit, but you can look and see whether at that time somebody's cell phone was on, and if at that time they were also on a conversation. Now you go plus or minus the time of the collision, because when the police arrive, they never get that precisely right. They never get down to the second what time this collision happened. So you've got a kind of a range, and you get somebody's cell phone records to determine if they were on the phone and using the phone at that time. Texting is, of course, more difficult, but then you get the texting records as well. It's important, and we do it, and it's proven very helpful in making distracted drivers accountable, which is our job.
Great information today, Claude. Thank you so much for answering our questions.
Absolutely. I'm here to answer all your questions, and if anybody has a question, I'm happy to answer them. My partner, George Choulos, and I spend a substantial amount of our day answering questions for people who call, even if we don't take the case. We like to help people, particularly motorcyclists and bicyclists. We're part of those communities, and we really enjoy making a difference and helping when we can.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your expertise today. That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyers. Our guest has been San Francisco lawyer Claude Wyle. Don't forget, if you want to ask Claude any questions about your situation, it is easy. Just go to askthelawyer.com, click the button at the top of the page that says Ask a Lawyer, and it doesn't cost anything to ask. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm Judy Maggio with askthelawyer.com.